Okay? He really wanted to be president. And one way he thought was really going to help him was he also wanted to he's from Chicago. So there's going to be one transcontinental railroad, either going to the south or going through Chicago. Which one do you think he wanted?
Chicago.
Going through Chicago. Well, how are you going to convince the South, if you're Stephen Douglas, that it would be a really good idea to put the transcontinental railroad to the north, which will bring, obviously, industry and business and commerce and tons of money? How would you convince the South of that?
Give them something.
What are you going to give them?
Slaves.
Well, what he ended up he was able to convince and ram through the Senate the Kansas-Nebraska Act. And the South was only too happy to do this. What the Kansas-Nebraska Act did was this territory, the Nebraska Territory, which covers up Nebraska and current-day Nebraska and Kansas, said that there would be two states, Nebraska and Kansas, and they would choose their slave issue on popular sovereignty. Now, how do you think the North felt about the fact that, and the basic theory was, the basic unspoken agreement, and basically it was even spoken, it wasn't in the law, but it was basically assumed that Nebraska would end up being a free state and Kansas would end up being a slave state. What is the Northern reaction, do you think, to that? Give me specifics. Ain't good. Give me specifics. If you're wondering what redneck is, Rahel, when answers are ain't good, that's a redneck answer. Alright? Do what? Well, yeah, that's what we're going to get. But tell me what they think it violates. What it does violate. It violates the Missouri Compromise, right? And the Missouri Compromise, as far as the North is concerned, is written in stone. Because it actually hems in slavery. It keeps slavery from extending north. The virtuous North. And now, think about this. Now that this is the case, moving forward, if you're the North, what are you possibly thinking?
Missouri Compromise doesn't really matter anymore.
And so, it might not just be Kansas. Might there be other territories that could possibly become slave too? So once this happens, the North starts to panic. If you're the South, what are you thinking? Give me specifics. Man's good. Right? Let's give me a specific. I like it. It's more place to put some dick in my mouth. Right? Let's... You know, every now and again you see dip in the water fountains.
That's gross.
That's redneck. That's white trash, to be fair. No. What is the South excited about? What can they possibly do?
More big cotton farms and stuff.
They can possibly extend slavery in this direction. So now, this literally changes the calculation the North had been making for a long time. The North had understood the Missouri Compromise was going to hem in slavery. And so long as they didn't let the South do crazy things like the Austin Manifesto or buy Honduras, then slavery was going to be stopped where it was at. But now it's not. And why does he do this? What is Stephen Douglas setting up? What do you think he wants?
War.
We want war? He wants to be president. And now
He gets the South votes.
he basically just won the South himself. Right?
Right.
He's won the South. And he's gonna win these northwestern states because he got the Transcontinental Railroad to go through. He's gonna lose, New Hampshire and Vermont and Massachusetts. But so long as he gets the entire South and the Midwest, he just won the presidency.
Does he become president?
Have you ever heard of President Douglas? He wasn't president. So no. Catch you the best. Alright. In the end, the actual reaction is the Republican Party. In fact, the Republican Party that's still around today was born as a result of the Kansas-Nebraska Act. The Republicans were the liberals in the 1850s. So tell your mom that. The Republicans were the liberals in the 1850s. By the way, on your GT report card, I might have said some ridiculous things on the comment section just to make your mother mad. This one might get worse.
Okay.
So hopefully your mom might I might be mentioning NPR and MSNBC on your GT report card.
That's fine.
The Republican Party forms because of their fear of the extension of slavery. So what Republicans, we're having Whigs come in, we're having some Northern Democrats come in. Remember we talked about the Free Soil Party? They're going to become part of the Republican Party now, and it's kind of a conglomeration of all these people. Okay? So now the South is dealing with a new party that's forming because of the reaction to this law. Many people will argue that it was the Kansas-Nebraska Act that got the real ball rolling, right? I mean, all the slavery stuff, obviously Southern territories, this is the big enchilada that got the ball moving, where the North was just, after this, there is no more compromise. It's just polarization and hatred.
So it's Douglas's fault.
Well, but didn't other people vote for this? So the fact that, and in the end, Douglas is not going to be, he's not even a pro-slave guy. But if you remember, like Franklin Pierce was a Northerner who wasn't particularly that anti-slave. He was a politician, right? This is the problem when people want, this is one of the problems of democracy sometimes, right? I mean, I'm not like for dictatorships. But one of the problems of democracy is people are ambitious. And sometimes they're going to do things, they're going to compromise principle, right, to get elected. I mean, do we ever see that? Maybe it's good, maybe it's bad. I mean, sometimes what if people stick to their principles and they won't compromise? Then you get things like what we have in Congress right now, right? We get Tea Party on one side, liberals on the other side, and nothing ever gets done. So I don't know what the answer is. Maybe benevolent dictatorship. I will tell you, I'm just kidding, Internet. What are the two most popular, what two presidents are considered the two greatest presidents in the history of our country? No. FDR and Lincoln. What two presidents basically had dictatorial power? FDR and Lincoln. What two presidents mostly ignored the Constitution? FDR and Lincoln. Now, I am very democratic. I'm for democracy, but I will tell you that it's ironic that our two greatest presidents, that almost everyone agrees, almost every historian agrees with that. Some will say Teddy Roosevelt's up there. But Lincoln just made up stuff as he went along. Some of the things he did were just not unconstitutional, they were absurdly unconstitutional. I told you about when he had people vote, right? Where he had people point guns at people. If you weren't going to vote for his party, you had to hold up a big sign with a color that represented you were voting against him and his party, and you had to walk down a line of soldiers with bayonets and show all the soldiers with bayonets that you were voting against their president. You can't do that. There's all kind of rules against that, right? FDR, we're going to get to it, he basically tried to control all three branches. And basically at some point did control all three branches. He won the presidential election 523 to 8. 523 to 8. You know how it takes months sometimes, or maybe years sometimes to get bills passed? He could get bills passed by lunch. He would say, "You're going to do it because I said you're going to do it because I'm FDR and you're not." And they got done because he was so scared of him. That's not democratic. So long as you like FDR, as long as you weren't rich, they hated him. His mom was real pissed off at him all the time.
Just like it.
No, I'm interrupting. He's going to be mad at me. We give him a round of applause, guys. Scariest mask today. Most original, scariest mask.
Oh, look who's on TV now.
Hey,
Yeah.
scariest mask. This is all original. This is
Right.
this is the best I've
The
ever
original
seen.
Brad Pitt mask.
That's the reason I love Halloween, for that one joke.
That's what Cooper's been doing too. You and Cooper get one joke and you just keep on trucking.
Hey, we're not very original, but we like to try.
I've seen Cooper do that already today. I've seen Cooper for 30 seconds. He's already done that joke. What's that number on that, by the way?
9 minutes.
Okay. All right. So now let's talk about. So we got the Kansas-Nebraska Act. Everybody's pissing each other. Everybody's out of the sorts of compromise, and now we get anti-slave literature. All right, and this is pouring fuel on the fire. specifically, and this is actually right before the Kansas-Nebraska Act, and I've been talking about this, what book just changes everything? Uncle Tom's Cabin.
Can we read that sometime?
You're welcome to read it. Uncle Tom's Cabin was Harriet Beecher Stowe's 1952 work. What was it about? Don't tell me Uncle Tom. Yes.
Isn't it about how a slave was treated in the home?
Tom is a slave. Like, the thing about the North is they didn't like the idea of slavery, but they didn't have a lot of contact with slavery. Does that make sense? They didn't know how to internalize slavery. And so they disagreed with it intellectually and religiously, but it didn't, for many people, maybe with Garrison, but for many people, the hatred of slavery wasn't there because it wasn't personal. Does that make sense? I mean, aren't there big things that out there you feel are like, you know what, I really hate human trafficking, it's the worst thing ever. But if you meet a girl who's been affected by human trafficking, won't that affect the way you see it? It personalizes it? Well, what Uncle Tom's Cabin did, Tom was a slave whose family, he was a nice guy and everybody liked him, and he was a good man, and his family was broken apart, and the slave owners treated them ruthlessly. And so readers got to know the slave, and got to like the slave, and felt his pain when he and his family were abused, and felt the pain especially when he and his family were ripped apart because of the slave trade, but they traded off family members. And what this did was internalize slavery into their being. Does this make sense? Because remember, nothing can change us like what we internalize as reading, right? You ever heard you are what you read? I mean, isn't that a real thing, right? And this book, many Northerners said God wrote this book. In fact, when Lincoln met her, do you know what Lincoln said? And tomorrow, after we do the test, I'll show you a bunch of the images and stuff. But he actually said, when he met her, here's a little girl that wrote the book that started this war. That this made abolition. Remember I said that there were abolitionists, but that was kind of a minority part of the North? This made abolition much more mainstream. This made people who were on the fence, I mean, they didn't like slavery, but you know, it was agreed upon in the Constitution. This made people pissed. And in 1850, had the South left, the North might have been like, you know what, go ahead and leave. But now we have Harriet Beecher Stowe, we have the Combines of 1850, and we got the Kansas-Nebraska Act, and now it's just a matter of time. Within a decade, over 2 million of these books were sold. In proportion to the population, this is the highest selling book of all time in America. I mean, obviously 2 million now is not like Harry Potter, but consider the population was much smaller then. And soldiers had, you know, they read it when they were younger, right? So a 20 or 25-year-old soldier had read this when he was 12 or 13 years old, right? People growing up reading this and internalizing the evil that is slavery. And now they are absolutely condemning slavery. There's another book that I want you to talk. It's by a guy named Hinton Helper. Great name, by the book. Hinton Helper. Hinton Helper wrote a book called The Impending Crisis of the South. The Impending Crisis of the South. And this book is different. Obviously, Uncle Tom's, by the way, Uncle Tom's Cabin doesn't call for war. It just is a story. Hinton Helper wrote The Impending Crisis of the South. Finally was published, this is 1857. And this guy was in North Carolina. And he didn't like slaves. He was not like pro-slave or anti-slave. He was not like an abolitionist. He made the argument that slavery ends up hurting poor whites as much as anybody else. Because what it does is it keeps them from having wages, right? He's trying to piss off poor Southern people. Now, what's the problem if you're a Southern plantation owner and somebody's trying to piss off poor white people in the South? Are there a lot of poor white people in the South?
Yes.
Are there a lot of rich white people in the South? No. But who controls the South? The rich white people. Well, if you've got people in the North who hate slavery, And now you got books trying to convince us, the poor white people, that it's the slave owners are screwing them over. How do the slave owners feel about what's going on in the world of literature? They are feeling like they're under threat. And they start banning everything, right? You know that you are not a particularly great society when you have to start banning books out of fear of what people will do. We don't ban a lot of books. We're a really open society. I mean, relative to other places, we are ridiculously open. Like, there are places like, the Netherlands that we think is really, really liberal and open, but they're not as much as you think. Like, for Muslim people, they have banned wearing traditional religious garb and stuff because they don't want to encourage radicalism. Now, radicalism we might not think is good, but we give everyone the right to dress like they want to, right? America's very open. Have we had times where we have been anti-democratic and banned books? Yeah. And if you ever are somewhere and your library start banning books or start not allowing books, or schools start not allowing books or banning books, then you need to raise up, because that's the first step towards a bad little way to go. That's a first really bad step.
What would be the evidence to say that you should allow all books?
What do you mean?
Because, if, let's say that something around.
Hold on, you start and stop that, please. Hit the red button, stop.